Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inner World podcast. I am your host, Dr. Pedro Cortina. In this podcast, we aim to explore the most powerful, efficient, joyful, and sustainable models of inner transformation out there. Thank you for joining us today. Let's talk about suffering. Yeah, I know. Many people prefer not to, and nevertheless, it's an important, not just important, it is a crucial aspect of our capacity to grow and our capacity to engage in life at the fullest. If we're not able to address our experience of suffering, just resisting this experience, or trying to pad this experience, or trying to manage this experience, for many people ends up completely consuming their lives. Suffering is ubiquitous. Is so common to human experience that we're just either simply accounting for it as a given, or trying to run away from it, while we try to continue with life as best we can. In some cases, in most cases probably actually, we're just trying not to think too much about the cause of the suffering, or but in other cases, we're just completely consumed by it. It's interesting how we often appear to develop and devise all kinds of structures, rules, and standards socially, emotionally, in our relationships, just in an attempt to control this suffering. And we haven't been very successful at it. Of course, I probably don't even need to say this, I'm not talking about pain in the body. I'm not talking about physiological pain. We have wonderful all kinds of medical approaches, and this is the Inner World podcast. So we're thinking of suffering as a condition that's driven by inner fear, or anxiety, or dissatisfaction, or tension, or dread, etc., etc. And when we're able to observe our internal human experience, we can see that as basic mental images arise inside our mind, in our consciousness, in our awareness, what we do is we tend to instinctively identify, label, separate, categorize, and concretize whatever is showing up internally in our mind into a broad landscape of either positive or negative categories. We additionally tend to categorize these initial separations or dualizations into a further endless stream of additional divisive subtleties. And these subtleties generate an internal positioning. They position ourselves internally. That is usually the cause for us to settle into basically one of two possibilities. The one we like, we want, we appreciate, or the one we don't want, or don't like, or don't appreciate. And so, regardless of what these may look like, these two possible existential polarizations or duality tend to immediately and automatically generate some kind of internal tension, a kind of basic position-based tension, as we seek to attract or probably keep what we naturally consider pleasurable, and or defend ourselves from what we would naturally consider painful or unwelcomed. So, additionally, it would also be very easy to see that at times these mental images that arise internally, or thoughts or emotions that arise internally, are sometimes completely random and nonsensical, and from crazy and strange to innocent or irrational. It also appears as if we were constantly being called upon to make sense of whatever is showing up inside, or to react, or to do something about our internal experience. So if our thoughts and emotional processes appear to be random or unstable at times, then they will also provide limited reliability and consistency for working with them, or interacting with them. And this generates a form of instability, tension, a form of ungroundedness that is also quite often a source for anxiety or suffering. So, and what's interesting is, given this situation, and this is just looking at how our mind works, this is just pragmatically noticing how our mind works. We tend to identify and we tend to align with, and we tend to support with the thoughts or emotions or images that apparently provide or support who we think we are, or who we think we want to be, or who we aspire to be. And at the same time, trying to get rid of, or discard, or eliminate, or battle with thoughts that reflect who we don't think we are. And this is what we do. We try to attract and connect with and support and feed our internal experience when it supports who we think we are, or who we think we should be, and then we reject and react, and we push away internal phenomena, thoughts, emotions, sensations, images, when they tend not to support who we think we are, or who we would like to be. So it's interesting to notice how as humans we've made something that sometimes is quite random, like our thoughts, be this extensive, almost impossible dimension of activity that we think we need to be managing, that we think we need to be organizing and controlling. And interestingly enough, this assumption that we need to be managing, controlling, supporting, rejecting whatever shows up inside is in itself one of the biggest sources of anxiety and internal separation and disconnection. And it's just this assumption that whatever is showing up internally needs to be either rejected or supported, that it needs to be managed, that it needs to be dealt with, that it needs to be fixed, that it needs to be addressed. And if we notice just the way these thoughts, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes completely random, how they truly show up inside, we'll notice that they show up on their own. They show up by themselves, and then they just spin themselves on one another. But this process of thinking, and there's some scientific research about this, happens without interaction of our awareness. So in other words, we're not the ones that are thinking. Thinking is happening. We're the ones that react to this thinking. And we're not the source, are aware of who we think we are, consciousness, the one who is aware that is listening or writing or talking. That one, they are not the source of thought. And yet, think about this is quite ironic and a huge source of suffering. And yet we think that that part of us either is the source of all those thoughts, emotions, sensations, or if not, at least it is the one that has to push away or bring closer or reject or manage everything that is happening. It's like the worst job in the universe. Can you imagine being in a position where you always need to be managing something that you actually cannot control? Managing something that you actually cannot manage? So it is not really the aim of inner transformation or inner growth is not really to change how our thoughts show up. It's what we do and how we react to these thoughts showing up. And in most cases, this doesn't mean, when I say what we do and react, this doesn't mean managing them, because we've tried for endless years as humanity has tried its best, and it seems to not be working that way. So what we do is we understand that this suffering, that this condition is brought on, shows up, this tension, this experience of inner separation, all forms of anxiety, all forms of dread, all forms of separation, disconnection. This all comes not from the thoughts themselves, but from our endless, fruitless effort to control, fix, and manage those free-flowing thoughts, emotions, and sensations. Free-flowing. I like that word. Free-flowing thoughts, emotions, sensations, and images. That is the nature, part of the nature of our mind. That's how it works. And attempting to control those, attempting to manage those, attempting to fix those, attempting to modify those, actually doesn't work. And it doesn't work in the way we probably are taught that it works, which is to, just man up or lady up or push hard, bootstraps, and all that stuff we hear, and manage and push away what is uncomfortable and hold in turn, hold what is what you want, or chase what is what you want. And probably in the world of physics, in the world out there, in the outer world, much of these strategies do work. In outside physics, there is very clear principles, gravity, mass, chemistry, on how to build stuff, or how to clean stuff, or how to fix stuff. And probably inspired in our success of many centuries now, developing our abilities as human beings to modify and structure the world out there, probably we've been thinking for the same time, we've been thinking that our inner world should or must behave in the same way. And what we've noticed, and we'll talk more about this in this podcast, is what we noticed is when it comes to our internal world, we can even say there are internal physics, and we should start exploring those, because one of the things that tends to be very clear in terms of internal world physics is that the more you try to fix, push, the more you want to modify by force your inner world, the more you want to reject internal experiences, the more you push, the more you try to fix, the more resistance you create, the more activated these things that you don't want in your inner world become. So the more you fight internally with what doesn't work for you, the more energy you give it, and the stronger it becomes. And it may subside for a while, but it is forcefully subdued. It's not resolved, it's forcefully subdued. So what happens when you have a pot of boiling water and you put something on top? You need to keep holding it for the steam not to push it, and so that's mostly what we do internally. When we don't like what we're experiencing internally, we tend to push it somewhere where it gets, quote unquote, out of the way. But because we're pushing and we're not updating and understanding and getting to know really what's going on, the pushing demands a tremendous amount of energy, because for that dimension of us to keep out of the way or to keep, quote unquote, quiet, we need to be directing an important amount of pressure and energy. We need to be constantly aware of what we're pushing out of the way. We need to make sure that it's out of the way. We need to deal with its own resistance of not being pushed out of the way, and that consumes our energy. And if you think about the number of things we have had, because this is what we learned to do, that we pushed away, it's like having 20, 30, 40, 50 boiling pots with some kind of cover, and we're trying to make the steam not go out. And so we need to be pushing, and we need to be generating internal tension. We need to be generating internal tension constantly on those points that are trying to move steam out of themselves. We need to be constantly pushing. So we're running around mostly doing that, and internally. And externally, we're just, surviving, just zombieing in a way that we deal with whatever we need to deal with in terms of our sustainment, our relationships, etc., and the rest of the time we need to be internally fighting and pushing the 50 boiling pots in our inner world. And the more, again, the more we push, the more reactive they become, and the more reactive they become, the more energy we need to push back, and the more we push back, the more reactive they become. In my book, Kerflexion, Living the Infinite Space of Being, I have a chapter on what I call the 2-for-1 paradox, and I'm going to be doing an episode on that, but this is basically the principle. The principle is that you get the counter, you get the second if you push the first, and the first is eliminating suffering that way, or trying to fix or eliminate suffering that way. The more you push that, the more you're going to get a response back. So you're getting 2-for-1. You want to get rid of your inner tension. You want to get rid of your inner anxiety, fear, dread. The more you push that away, the more you're going to be feeding it, and the more it's going to want to be back. Yeah. So, yeah, as I was saying, this is a huge realization when it comes to noticing our thoughts and emotions. There's absolutely no way of permanently controlling our inner universe. As I was saying, we may be able to induce a certain level of influence that may last for a while, and then we'll only be succumbing to a negative aspect of that again and again. And there's also an interesting dimension about suffering. I call it, I prefer to call, I don't like to use the word suffering much because it has so many connotations, but I like this word I've been using, tension, this like internal tension. And there's several forms of internal tension. Another one is what I call existential tension. Existential tension. And this is a kind of tension that is generally more profound. It deals with the big questions of life, and tends to demand we take life considerably more personally and seriously than we may need. We question things such as our relationship with reality, with the way things are at a designer level, why things are the way they are. Why do we experience hate? Why are there atrocities in the world? Why is there crime? Why is there suicide? And when it comes to existential tension, we also may see ourselves addressing complications that revolve around our purpose in life, our passion, the direction we want to grow in, as well as countless other possibilities regarding social expectations or, notions of justice, punishment, notions of religion, morality, right action, transcendence, etc., etc. And there's also what I like to call conditioning tension. And this is what we are, the expectations we are set up socially as we are born in this world. These expectations necessarily create some form of conditioning tension. And it can happen in all kinds of things and at different levels. Some people experience conditioning tension in a way more intense form than others. And it's easy to understand. conditioning generates tension because of the basic fact that there is dissonance between what the individual may consider to be in their best interest and what the group may consider to be in the best interest of the individual and or the group. And so this is also something that it is important to address. It is incredibly important to address in our exploration to understand ourselves better and to be able to experience a harmonized inner dimension. A harmonized inner dimension. There's also tension around, instability, around trying to control things long term, job, family, relationships, money, resources, housing, etc., etc. So we're socialized to do our best, to achieve whatever we're supposed to achieve, law, love, career, companionship, independence, success. But it's interesting to see how these hopes or ideas or wants in life end up being affected or sometimes even sabotaged by our inability to understand how our mind really works and how to address this natural emergence of internal form. By internal form, I understand, internal phenomena, thoughts, emotions, sensations, images. Thoughts, emotions, sensations, images. Because we believe we are the original creators or authors, or our awareness, our will, our consciousness. We think that our consciousness is actually the one that comes up with these thoughts, emotions, sensations, and images. And it is not our awareness. It comes, as I said before, and there's research around this. It's scientifically, has been scientifically explored. When we become aware of a thought, the thought was produced earlier. We become aware of thoughts after the thought is produced. So what is producing the thought? And given that we do not have access to that dimension, the approach that we use to dealing with all those kinds of internal phenomena, thoughts, emotions, sensations, images, ends up becoming quite problematic. Yeah, so it's just, in essence, no matter what our life looks like, we tend to have some kind of sincere or profound, complaint. It can be existential, it can be personal, it can be resource related, it can be it can have to do with social issues or gender issues or preference issues, or we just seem to be having to push away or bring in some kind of or have a system or manage internally to address this experience of tension. And what seems to be working the best is as we acknowledge that this is something somehow beyond our control, that we're not the originator, we're not the conscious originators of our inner phenomena, thoughts, emotions, sensations, and emotions, because we're not the origin, the conscious origin of those. What we need to do, rather than believing that we actually are the source and that we have to, manage, push away, hide, fix, destroy in some cases, probably the best approach would be, and the reasonable approach would be, and one that has been incredibly transformational and powerful, is to actually just step back a bit and become witnesses, become observers, become observers of this inner phenomenon, knowing that we are not the conscious source of it, and approaching it in a much more curious and open and playful and joyful way. It's like when you're in a situation that you absolutely know that you cannot control, and that option is completely outside of your frame. Something shifts. Some freedom shows up, from some form of spaciousness shows up, some form of understanding shows up. Oh, okay. Some form of and at the same time, when that happens, then we move into a space of, okay, so if I can't do this, is there something that I actually can do? Is there something that I actually can do? And when it comes to our inner world, yes, there is something that we actually can do. And that is to change our relationship with our inner world from being one of managing, fixing, pushing, controlling, pulling, and trying to eliminate, to one of open, genuine curiosity. Oh, why is this thought showing up? And not in a critical way. Why is this thought showing up? What's wrong with you? Not in a critical way. Just, why is this thought showing up? Or not even why. Just amused. Oh, this thought is showing up. And then open curiosity. Is there something there? Is there something for me to learn? Is there something for... Just not fighting, not pushing, just noticing, just opening to it, just allowing it to use the same internal space you are using, as if they were independent beings that shared your inner space with you, and that sharing who they are, what they do, is the purpose of life, as it is yours, and that this inner world is vast enough for to be shared by countless thoughts and sensations or emotions, just showing up, and not necessarily assuming that what is showing up is something that we are generating through our conscious awareness process. And more importantly, that it is something that we actually need to do. something about, something that we need to fix. It's not something that we need to fix. It's not something that we need to address. It's not something that we need to push. Because if it is, that is just going to be an endless source of energy, draining, suffering, apprehension, anxiety, discontent, etc., etc., etc. So we notice what shows up. We understand that it's showing up from a prior space of us becoming aware of it, that we do not have access to, that we cannot control. And from that space, we get genuinely curious, really open and genuinely curious. And when we do this, two things happen. First of all, we're not collecting boiling pots all around our inner world because we know it doesn't work. So just that simple thing, to stop collecting boiling pots inside, just that, and to connect with, get curious about, and liberate all the other boiling pots we've been accumulating. Just that, allowing this spaciousness inside, this freedom inside, just that changes our lived experience dramatically, tremendously. It changes our inner experience from being a slave to 50 boiling pots into being a witness and being open and being curious and being willing to learn and being sometimes even entertained in the good sense of the word, in the marvelous, how entertainment is marvelous and in that sense of the word, rather than becoming slaves to the 70 or the 50 or the 60 or the 40 boiling pots that we have going and that we need to manage. So the way to truly engage with our inner world is one of understanding how it works. And that is clearly the model it follows. And the other one is to actually, after really understanding how it works internally for ourselves in our own direct experience, not reading a scientific journal of neuroscience, just through our personal inner experience, knowing and noticing that what shows up from a place where we are not actually producing it from our conscious awareness, but rather that it is happening on its own. And for this, there's a very simple exercise. We just sit down, take a few breaths, and we just let our mind run. And when we do this openly and genuinely curious, we will notice that it does. It just runs. It just runs. Mind just runs. That's what it does. And the more you try to control it, and that's why many people suffer when they're starting to learn about traditional ways to meditate, because the emphasis is erroneously around lessening thoughts or achieving the absence of thought and it is not that. It is just having an ability, developing an ability for ourselves to become internal observers, because we understand that thoughts are produced at a layer, at an internal layer level that we do not have access to, and therefore we're not the conscious, authors. We're not the conscious creators of thoughts. And that would naturally lead to us becoming genuinely curious in the way you walk on the street and you're open and curious about what's going on out there. And you're not trying to manage or interject or control or fix everybody around you that you are interacting with. You're just noticing and allowing them to have their own space as you have your own space. So it's a very interesting trip how suffering is internal suffering is generally speaking a result of our lack of understanding of what are the internal physics, internal mechanics of our system. And the other one, because we've been socialized to try to deal with our inner world in the same way we deal with the outer world. And it just doesn't work. So in terms of practice, if there's one practice that I think is very important to take away, is this practice where you just sit down or lie down comfortably, take a few deep breaths, and you just move inside and you just notice what's going on with the awareness that this is happening on its own. You can actually do that exercise as well, closing your eyes, taking a deep breath, and just noticing, oh, where did that one come from? Like, who created it? Who had the thought, oh, I'm going to think of this, or I'm going to... And the more we move into that space and we become curious about space, the more clear it will become that thoughts show up on their own. Thoughts, images, emotions, sensations, our inner phenomena shows up in their own terms, in their own accord, that we're not the authors of it. We're not the ones that are driving thoughts. We're the ones that are reacting to thoughts. That doesn't mean you don't think. That doesn't mean you don't form sentences in your inner world. This doesn't mean you don't interact with your inner world. You do. We do. What it means is that that's what we're doing mostly, reacting. We're not the source of the challenging thought or the difficult thought. We're not the source of the criticizing thought. We're not the source of the demeaning thought. We're not the source of the thought that drives fear, that is afraid of, losing someone or something. We react, so it's a combination of thoughts that are emerging on their own and our reaction to those thoughts. But when we do this exercise, when you're sitting down and just becoming a witness internally, and you silence the reactive voice, and this is very important, and you silence the reactive voice internally, then whatever is coming from a deeper layer just shows up and manifests. And if we're open and genuinely curious, we can learn tremendously. And as these images, sensations, emotions show up and are held in a witnessing space, they themselves are somehow appreciative and grateful because they don't need to keep pushing to come out. They don't need to be fighting to come out. And as that happens, we become lighter, we become more aligned, we become clearer. The energy that we used to literally waste in trying to manage all those boiling pots is now available to us to create, to connect, to enjoy, to love, to experience life. And I would venture to say that probably that is more aligned to the meaning and the purpose of life than having to manage 50 boiling pots internally, in our mind, in our world, in our heart. Thank you for joining me. And have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Inner World Podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Pedro Cortina. See you next time.